evening, everyone. I'd like to call the August 9th Town Board meeting to order. I ask everyone to please stand and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We ask our Deputy Town Clerk to please call the roll.
Supervisor Williams?
Present.
Councilman Farrell?
Present.
Councilwoman Housen? Present. Councilman Doyle?
Present.
Councilwoman Parrish? Present.
Great. So, again, good evening. I see we have a large crowd. There are a number of folks here that don't typically come to town board meetings, so I'd like to talk a little bit about the process for this evening so that we can move forward. The agenda actually lists 5 public hearings that were scheduled for tonight. We're going to open and close, or open and continue several of these public hearings because of various reasons. And we'll take public comment on the public hearings that we're going to be continuing, the public hearings that we'll actually be taking action on tonight. And after that, typically what we do in these town board meetings is that we go through each of the resolution items. We explain what the resolution items are. Different members of town staff will kind of do the background on them. And then we take public comment just on the things that are on the resolution, and then we vote on the resolution. At the end of the meeting, we typically then open it up for any additional public comment where folks can speak on any matters that they wish to speak on. We'll try to move quickly. I know that we have some sign-in sheets. We ask people to sign in, and folks will have 3 minutes to offer their comments on any of the agenda items or on in general at the end of the meeting. So I hope we're clear on that, and that's pretty much how the process is, and we'll be here as long as it needs to be for folks to be able to speak. So with that being said, I'd like to move forward with the first public hearing. The application of the Bobbish of Rockland, A.K. and Bob Synagogue of New City, and the Hebrew Academy for a special permit to conduct a child daycare center. Entertain a motion to open that public hearing. Moved by Councilman Noto, seconded by Councilman Carey. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, now we ask Joe Simone, our town planner, to explain what's taking place with this, because we will not be taking action on this tonight.
The Chabad had made an application to the town board for a special permit to operate a daycare. They currently have a half-day program for the students who go to the school, and they're looking for a full-day program. That requires a special permit of the town board and also a site plan from the planning board. The application was also continued at the planning board, and the town board will be continuing this in September. There are still some issues with the building, which have to be taken care of before we'll entertain this application for this full-day daycare.
And typically, if I understand this correctly, Mr. Simone, earlier this year with the new administration, we made a change in policy for the town, and any application that comes before any of the land use boards, if there are any violations, we typically will not agenda that until the violations are perfected, correct?
That's correct. We received notification from our fire inspector that there were still outstanding violations on the property, and as such, the planning board pulled the application last week, and the town board is doing the same. We will not hear applications that have outstanding violations.
So this will not be moving forward, and we'll actually clear up their issues, and we're going to continue this now to the September 6th town board meeting, correct? Right. Okay. Any questions from the town board on this? All right, with that being said, I'd like to entertain a motion to continue this to the September 6th town board meeting. So moved by Councilman Borelli, second by Councilman Noto. All those in favor say aye. Aye. The matter is continued. So the second, Mr. Simone can stay there as well. The second proposed hearing is proposed local law amending Chapter 157, housing standards applicable to residential premises, and Chapter 290, zoning for the code of the town of Clarkstown. And we're also going to be continuing that. So, entertain a motion to open the public hearing. Moved by Councilman Noah, second by Councilman Morelli. All those in favor say aye. Then Mr. Simoes, if you could discuss this one as well.
Certainly. There are two changes proposed to our town code. One is involving definitions for senior housing, assisted living, and congregate care, which is also another form of senior citizen housing. What we're doing is adding a sentence to the definitions to clarify that these developments are restricted to those who are over age 55. The town had recently, or a few years ago, the town had instituted new definitions for active adult residents. It's very similar language stating that a house you'd have to have one person in the household be at least 55 and older. This is in conformance with federal regulations. When we looked at the definitions for senior housing, we saw that the wording was designed for and didn't say restricted to. We wanted to be absolutely certain that as developments come in for senior housing, they are truly restricted for those over 55. There's a further restriction stating that you could not have children under, you could have any individuals under the age of 18. That's the definition, the same language is being put in those three definitions. The other change is having to do with housing standards for residential premises, requires a rental registry, and also a change to the definition of family. This will help the town in code enforcement. The reason the town board is looking to continue this, we received comments from the county planning department, some recommendations that to add and change some of the definitions, that has to be further researched. And so we're looking to have this continue in September so we can make changes or do the additional research that we need to make these changes.
Any questions from the members of the town board? So this is really tightening up of our land use laws, and it's to ensure that any senior housing, assisted living facilities that might come into our town are really designed for what they're supposed to be, and that they're really age restricted. And in addition, that children are not living in these in any of these facilities that might be built within the town going forward. So it's a tightening up of the law.
Right.
Okay. Great. So with that, I entertain a motion to continue the public hearing to September 6th. So moved. Moved by Councilman Morelli, second by Councilman Noah. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All right. Mr. Simoes, one more application of Kids Kingdom for special permit to conduct a child. Councilman Morelli, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Okay.
Kids Kingdom has been in operation for several years in Nanuet. They provide half-day daycare, and they are also looking to have full-day daycare, which is much in demand. They will increase their enrollment slightly, but really they're looking to have really from half-day to full-day. Again, this requires a special permit of the town board. This was reviewed at the planning board just last week. The planning board did recommend it in favor, with the addition that there be a condition on the special permit that they have crossing guards for the children to be able to cross over from the actual daycare across the playground, because they do have to cross a driveway and parking area. They are going to be redesigning that parking area. They're going to put speed bumps and stop signs and sidewalk to make it as safe as possible. The planning board is requesting that this additional condition be put on of having the crossing guards to be sure that the traffic is stopped when the kids are crossing. The reason that this is being continued is that there was an issue with the notice for the special permit. It wasn't sent or picked up by the applicant in time to be posted. So this is being continued over to September for that reason.
To allow for the public to meet the legal requirement for notice, and in case folks want to come out and speak on it. So, okay.
Right.
Any questions from the board? And so with that being said, I'll entertain a motion to continue this also to September 3rd. Moved by Councilman Carey, seconded by Councilman Howard. All those in favor say aye. Okay. So we actually have two public hearings now that are going to take place. Mr. Simoes, you can take your seat. Mr. Shepard, if you please come forward, or Town Assessor. This is a proposed local law amending Chapter 262, taxation of the Code of the Town of Clarkstown regarding senior citizen tax exemption. I'd like to entertain a motion to open this public hearing. Moved by Councilman Dodd, seconded by Councilwoman Houser. All those in favor say aye.
What we're looking to do tonight is to amend the local law amending Chapter 262 of the Code of the Town of Clarkstown regarding the senior citizen tax exemptions. What these two changes will enable senior citizens to do is first, it'll allow the senior citizen to file a limited income exemption that they have to do annually up into the day of grievance day. This takes the pressure off the senior citizen and enables them to file up until the fourth Tuesday in May. The second provision will allow, under good cause, a senior citizen to file even after the final roll has been filed. So if the senior citizen is an illness, their spouse is ill, they may provide a letter to the assessor, and then the assessor shall make a determination if they qualify, and then they will then therefore get granted even after the roll is final. These two items are fairly important because the baby boomer generation is living longer, and there are a lot more disabilities that they are dealing with today.
Any questions from members of the town board? Okay, are there any members of the public that would like to speak on this item?
Hello, my name is Jack Bernardo. I've been living in Columbus for about 38 years. And last year, we went through an illness with my wife. It was very difficult at times to get back and forth. We were going up to Orange County. It was something that I wish on everybody. And it's okay now, but we're still going for treatment. But that was the reason why we was unable to get there on time. That's all I have to say about it. Thank you very much.
So this law, if we make this change, this would address a situation such as your own.
Yes.
Hardship, it would allow you,
Yes.
anything that can help our seniors is related to that.
Yes, it will. Thank you. It's good for a lot of us, I'm sure.
Anyone else wishing to speak on this item? There being none, I entertain a motion to close and adopt. Moved by Councilman Melo, second by Councilwoman Farrelly. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, the final public hearing of this evening is a continuation of the application of Denham Scholastic Academy for special permits to conduct a child daycare center, and I guess our town planner, Joe Simone, to come back up from the center as well, to be able to kind of discuss this, and then we have the applicant's representative here as well.
We're on a roll with daycare centers. So Denham Scholastic Academy is looking to open a daycare in former St. Augustine's school. And this was referred to the planning board by the town board. And they met on July 13th. The planning board reviewed this and saw that this met all of the recommendations, the conditions and findings that are necessary for granting this special permit. As a former school, it's really ideally situated for a daycare. They're looking to use a couple of the classrooms, potentially expand to more of the classrooms on the ground floor. The planning board saw absolutely no issue with this application whatsoever. They are reserving some parking spaces for drop-off right near the door, which is ideal. The planning board did look at the route that the children would take from the classroom to the playground. There's no issue there. So the planning board is recommending in favor of this special permit. You received comments from the county planning department. They commented about needing an exhibit that showed that route from the school to the playground, which has been in operation for years. And they also noted there was an issue with the tax lot designation, so thus it was continued. This was actually continued from the previous town board meeting because of that issue with the notice on the tax lot. So both of those issues have been dealt with. The town board designated me as the agent under seeker, and my recommendation is that this is actually a type 2 action, meaning that there's no further processing necessary under the State Environmental Quality Review Act. Really what we're talking about is a replacement, rehabilitation, or reconstruction of a structure or facility in kind on the same site. It was a school, it's basically going to operate as a school for all intents and purposes. So the environmental impacts are nil. So that is what I'm recommending to the town board if they wish to grant this special permit.
So would this require a negative declaration?
No, as a type 2, if you accept it as a type 2, you don't need a negative declaration because what we're basically saying is there is no environment. It's one of those actions that actually are exempt from environmental review because you have basically an existing school that operated and you're continuing that particular use. It's a rehab, it's a change, but it's not. There's no substance. There's no real environmental issue to deal with. So you just need to note that in the resolution that you passed.
I understand they're looking to improve as far as the security, enhancing some lighting and internal security systems.
I'll let the applicant speak to that.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Greenwald, would you like to speak on behalf of the applicant?
Yes, please.
Thank you. Please identify yourself for those here.
Jay Greenwell, land surveyor and land planner. Thank you. Dr. Benham is here tonight to answer any specific questions with respect to the operation of the Scholastic Academy. Again, as Mr. Samos mentioned, this makes a tremendous amount of sense if we're utilizing the currently vacant school for the same use, same type of use as the proposed. In order to accommodate this proposal, I would like to point out that there is absolutely no construction proposed. There are no site modifications to the outside, to the site, to accommodate this project. We think it's a perfect fit, and we would request you grant the special permit. Dr. Benham, do you have any comments with respect to any need for additional security?
This is the school clerk.
Just not on the microphone.
I'm sorry. Good evening.
Please identify yourself again for the record.
Yes, my name is Dr. Marla Benham, and I'm the director of the Scholastic Academy. The school has a security in place with a lock and doors from previous schools that have been there. The school will operate during day hours, 8 to 6. So as far as lighting, everything is in place as far as that is concerned.
Nothing additional is needed. I mean, high scores have been used in a while, but we're satisfied that we have the need and that is satisfied.
Any additional questions from members of the town board? Okay. Is there anyone from the public wishing to speak on this item? Yes, sir.
Good evening, members of the board, member of the public, Pete Bradley, Congress resident. Question right here about the school. It says here a child care center. Can we have more clarification on why it's written as a child care center and being presented as a school? Has it been cleared, or does it have to be cleared for the Clarkstown Central School District before we go and certify a school to operate here? Because as we may or may not know, children that do need special education will fall into the Clarkstown Central School District, I believe, from what I recall from going to school board meetings. So we get a lot more clarity because this says child care and now we're talking about a school. Thank you.
Proposal requires a special permit for daycare center for children 2 to 6, and it is the use of the school that is in a similar context. That's the point we were making.
So it's not a school.
That's correct.
No, and the way that, I mean, not to try to butt in, but the way that the state has the daycare center is because the school can only operate during a certain amount of hours. I think it's 2, and the daycare center is 3, I think. So, which is why we're seeing a lot more applications that say daycare center, but really are for nursery schools or early childhood centers because of the way the state law is written regarding these particular sites. Is that?
Yes.
If I could just add, when we were applying for the certificate, the language between the Clarkstown and the child OCFS office of child and family sector, the definition is a little bit different. If far as daycare versus childcare, that's why we needed to have special preference.
So what is it though? It's essentially, it's daycare?
It's a child daycare with a preschool, so
With a
kids
preschool
up until
component.
kindergarten.
So kids up to kindergarten. And how many students?
Right now we have 2 classes,
Which is how many?
up to 50 to 80 students. Sorry, I have a cold. 18 students per class.
36 roughly? And what's the limitation on the application? How many can you go up?
As far as from the state,
Number.
24. Because it goes based on square footage of the classrooms. That will allow us, which will give us the parameters of how many students are occupying a class. And be supported by the amount
So, and you're using 2 or 3 classes?
2 classes.
Only 2. So it could be up to 48 students.
What was discussed at TAC was to provide an additional expansion if the school, if the daycare center is successful in the school.
And that would require coming back for additional approval.
I don't believe it would.
It would require, I think it would require state, it might require state
Correct.
approval.
That's what I mean.
We're giving use approval, but the state certifies the
Correct.
facility for what it's able to do.
Right. So,
That's
right
what I'm
now,
trying to
as
get.
far as the fire inspection and inspectors from the state, they will approve the first floor that we'd be able to occupy if needed. But right now, we're only occupying 2 rooms.
Any additional questions from any members of the public on this item?
Have another question?
Go on.
I haven't heard of any of this until tonight, so I'd like to know, as far as I can tell, 6-year-olds go all the way up to first grade. Is there going to be a time when some of these students are going to require education from the Clarkstown Central School District? That's my question. And has this been run by this Clarkstown Central School Board? Do they need approval for this from the Clarkstown Central School Board as well?
Mrs. Knox, can you speak to that?
This daycare, it's not something that would go through the school district, right? What you're providing here is daycare, so parents who need to have their kids taken care of while they're working. And what they provide is some education, so they're not just there all day, they provide some sort of education. The same as our preschool program, similar to Street Community Center, or any of the other preschool programs, except they are all day. They're actually moving towards that in a lot of our preschool programs to all-day programs, if you're lucky enough to have, if you're doing lotteries to have those full-day programs. This is separate. This is a private institution that's basically providing daycare, which is much needed in the community.
And so this, again, just to clarify, so from what you're representing here, this does not require, and does not involve anything with the Clarkstown School District state.
As far as I know. There's no, the licensing is with the state of New York.
So I think the question that Mr. Brown was getting at is, will this impact or have any concerns on the school district as the daycare? I think that's the question.
No, 6-year-olds go to first grade and kindergarten. Are they?
It's
Based on their residence.
It's based on daycare up to, what age are you talking about?
That's first grade.
That's the way, okay, so we've had several of these type of applications before. The way the state has the policy related to early childhood, this is the certification. It goes to age 6. The people in the program are going to be till kindergarten age. You might have a couple of 5-year-olds because based on the Clarkstown cutoff date or the Nanuet or Niagara cutoff date, some 5-year-olds may end up in the program in the spring, let's say, right when they turn 5. But this is not going to impact Clarkstown special ed services because these kids are pre-kindergarten age. And according to the state of New York, you don't need to provide those services until they reach kindergarten age.
But They just said 2 to 6, not 5.
Well, I should repeat myself over and over, but I don't.
Mr. Bradley, let me just be clear. And again, you know, we rely on our experts. And our town planners is representing that this will have no impact on the Clarkstown school district because it's daycare. Ms. Hausner is talking about change in the law that's taking place as it relates to the licensing of these facilities through New York State. This will have no perceived impact from what our town staff has told us about the process and Mr. Simoes is repeating here this evening. It's daycare, although there's a twist on the way in which the state has done the licensing. I think it kind of clarifies it's not going to impact the Clarkstown Central School District, just as our own program that's run over a street school by the town doesn't impact the Clarkstown Central School District at this point, or the program that's run under the same licensure by the County of Rockland or some of the others. This is daycare, but it's licensed in a way in which it covers up to age 7. Correct? Correct. Is there anyone else that has any additional comments on this matter? I think we've answered the questions. Is it something different?
Yes, it's different.
All right, I'm just going to parse what I just heard tonight. It is 2 to 6. It is not 5, it is 6. That is first grade and kindergarten. When you're doing this in a private school, I know this because I've gone to a ton of school board meetings. If it's going to be sanctioned as a school and not a daycare center, we have to provide books, nurses, and busing. Where are these students? Where are they coming from? Is this a school? Are we going to be taking their special ed kids and educating them? It doesn't appear that the answers are here tonight. Please table this until we have firm answers. Whether that be talking to the Clarkstown Central School District, asking if they know about this, there's more questions that need to be answered, at least on my end. Thank you.
So, can I the formal application name is Application of Benham Scholastic Academy. Where is it referred to as a school?
Tonight, there was testimony saying it's a school by this gentleman.
It's a school building.
No, he said it is used as a school, 2 to 6 years old as a school. That was stated tonight. And childcare.
No, Mr. Bell, please have a seat. Mr. Greenwald, please come up and explain and clarify.
It is.
These are typically standard annual agreements, and the reimbursement rate varies. For agenda item 2A, the reimbursement is $2,400 per student for North Rockland. For the Clarkstown Central School District, it's $2,350, and for the Ramapo Central School District, it's $2,400. That's correct? Yes. Any questions from members of the board? So we'll move on to agenda item number 3, which is amending resolution 340 of 2016. There was a clarification that was requested by the Rockland County Sewer District. We passed a resolution at one of our prior town board meetings. The prior administration had engaged in a dialogue and discussion with the Rockland County Sewer District for funding in the amount of $2.5 million to build a police storage facility. Over time, it was determined by bond counsel for the County of Rockland that that was an inappropriate and illegal use of funds of the sewer district. They cannot pay for a police storage facility. They can pay for a storage facility for the sewer district. So the project essentially fell apart, and the sewer district reneged on its funding. Upon taking office as supervisor, I had a discussion with the sewer district, and as I am now a member of the sewer district by right as supervisor. And they indicated they wished us to withdraw our prior resolution for the 2.5, the funding that was inappropriately designated. The sewer district is asked us to withdraw it, and they are going to authorize $1.5 million for us to do additional work on our sewer pump station. And in order to effectuate this, we had to put a resolution in the sewer district to ask for an additional language that their bond counsel had required within the resolution, so that's what's taking place tonight. This is amending the resolution from 2 months ago, and will enable the town to actually receive $1.5 million from the sewer district to cover overages on the pump station upgrades that have taken place over the last year or so. There are about 11 pump stations within the town of Clarkstown that were being addressed that the sewer district was paying for, and the funding for the proposed police storage shed, which was deemed inappropriate, is being removed. So that's what this resolution is. Any questions from members of the town board? Okay, resolution number 4 is adopting the determination of significance under seeker for environmental quality review, West Nyack, revitalization of Hamlet Center flood protection and wetland restoration project. We got some combination between our town planner and our town attorney, Mr. Schofield. Perhaps you could address this.
Yeah, this is just simply a review of the determination regarding the revitalization project for West Nyack, and basically we distributed the PIF out and basically take a look at the surface water flooding and plants and animals and the impact of the proposed project, and basically we're recommending that you adopt this resolution.
Okay. And this will enable the West Nyack revitalization project to move forward, correct?
Right.
Any questions from members of the board? Okay, Mr. Schofield will ask you also to draft resolution number 5, which is amending resolution number 447 of 2015 regarding the proposed acquisition of property in West Nyack.
Yeah, there was a previous resolution adopted last December, and basically we're asking that the settlement be in the context of the stipulation of settlement between Mr. Owens and myself, so that we could acquire a portion of 23 Sickle in West Nyack.
So this is the town board a number of years ago determined to acquire by eminent domain a key piece of property in downtown West Nyack as part of the West Nyack revitalization project. The homeowner or property owner who does not live locally, he lives in Hawaii, is it?
Correct.
He lives in Hawaii. I feel bad for him, but some people have to do it. He contested. This is now part of a settlement, and the final purchase price, which will be bonded, is $300,000. Correct?
That's correct.
All right. Any questions from members of the board? Again, this will enable us to move forward with the long-awaited West Nyack revitalization project once our permits are secured. Item number 7, authorizing installation of streetlights. Item number 6, granting permission to Andean Brewing Company to dispense alcoholic beverages at the annual Italian Festival in Congress. Town attorney, can you explain that?
Again, you can dispense alcohol, but you need a resolution from the town board on the plan, and I believe this has done this in the past.
Correct. So this is the annual Italian Festival in Congress, and so for all of those that are planning to attend, there'll be alcohol there.
Yeah.
This is passed this tonight. Okay, resolution number 7, authorizing installation of streetlights between number 23 Terry Hill Drive and number 1 Cricket Court, New City. The cost initially is $2,892.64, with annual maintenance of $168.84 per year. This is essentially the installation of a 70-watt sodium vapor streetlight on this pole. It was recommended by, or requested by residents, it was evaluated by the town, and this will be installed by Archer Rockland, and it'll be a charge assessed to the town. In fairly short order, the town will be acquiring our streetlights to save some money. We can talk about that later on. But this is one of the last streetlights that Archer Rockland will actually be putting in to improve safety. Any questions from members of the board? Back to the parcel from the county of Rockland. Again, our town attorney is going to be busy man today. If you could explain it to them.
Yes, this is 141 Massachusetts Avenue, formerly owned by Barry Goldberg. Delinquent in taxes, we acquired the property from the county because of tax delinquent. The county put a lien on the property, cleaned up some years ago, we cleaned it up, and it has been acquired.
Any questions from members of the board?
So this is acquiring a tax delinquent parcel from the county. It's long been an issue. A number of residents within Congress have been concerned about this property and will be acquiring it, and eventually the town will be looking to do something potentially with volunteer housing for firefighters and first responders with this and the adjoining property. So something that's been long waited. Again, resolution number 9, I can speak to this. This is actually authorizing the supervisor to accept the proposal and enter into an agreement with the New York Power Authority regarding the LED street lighting in the town of Clarkstown. There's been a lot of discussion that's taken place. We've actually been in fairly lengthy discussions I have with, along with other town staff, with Clarkstown Supervisor Andy Stewart. We've had a number of discussions about the town, which is on the precipice of purchasing our overhead streetlights. This will actually bring about a fairly significant savings to the town of Clarkstown going forward. What's very interesting is our overhead streetlights, as you just saw from one of the earlier resolutions, are owned by Margin Rockland. Margin Rockland installs the streetlights and charges the town, and then we have annual upkeep on what it is, and it's into the millions of dollars for our lighting district. We previously this year passed a resolution to purchase our entire overhead streetlights within the town of Clarkstown. It's approximately 3,800 streetlights. We'll actually be the first community on this side of the river that's done it. A number of communities around the state have done it and around the country. So we're purchasing our overhead lights only. There are probably about 80% of our system, about 20% of our system which is fed from underneath, from underground. So this is only the streetlights that are fed with overhead wires, so we purchase it. The moment the town purchases our streetlights, we go into a different classification under the public service law, and by owning our streetlights, we immediately will save almost $600,000 per year by just owning them. In addition to that, we're actually now going up with retrofitting, where the lights themselves, the fixtures themselves will stay, but we'll retrofit them with LED fixtures. The New York Power Authority, which is a public authority, has actually given us a proposal, and they will retrofit all the lights within a year or less at a total cost of $2,323,000 that's projected. And they will manage the entire project for us. The annual savings per year on the retrofitting is $455,000. So between the purchase and the retrofitting of the lights, it'll be a $1 million savings per year, which will kick in by the latter half of 2017. It's a fairly significant savings for the town of Clarkstown. The New York Power Authority, what I'm also delighted is that as a public authority, they have the ability to finance and do their own bonding, and typically the town of Clarkstown's bonding rates are pretty competitive. Somewhere in the 1.5% range on some of our recent bonding. The Power Authority will actually finance this project at 0.6%, and which will mean that the town of Clarkstown will pay for all of these upgrades within 3.5 years from the savings, and we'll still save $450,000 a year on top of that. And we won't have to bond it. So on our capital plan, we're actually had about contributed for this, and upwards of $500,000 on the purchase of the light. So I'm very excited about it. That's what we're approving tonight, and then we'll go through the process with the Power Authority, which will actually manage the project for us as well. Any questions from members of the board?
No, I just want to add though, but the replacement savings is even more beneficial. The cost of bolts, trucks, and people to do the work, to get them in for replacement and tying up traffic will also be greatly reduced. So this will be a huge savings.
Any other questions from the board? Okay, resolution number 10, authorizing the settlement of the following tax statutory matters. Mr. Schofield, if you would. Sure. The first one is the property located 311 North Midland Avenue in Upper Nyack. Basically, the cost of tax rate is assessors determined is $3,207. Second resolution is P&J, and they have basically brought 4 parcels into lawsuit, and basically the reduction there looking at is cost is $5,506. They're some commercial buildings and some apartment buildings, but most of them are commercial. Any questions from the board on this? Personnel items, personnel changes, agenda item number 11, A through H. So we'll go through them one by one. A is rescinding the resolution from last month. Unfortunately, we have moved forward with the hiring of Mr. Ian Smith as the zoning administrator, code enforcement officer. Mr. Smith was working for another municipality, and they counter-offered him, and unfortunately he rescinded his decision to work for the town of Clarkstown, so we are now looking for his replacement. Item D is the appointment permanent of Stacy Kuo, secretarial assistant and legal. Ms. Kuo is similar to list. She's passed this, so appointing her to the permanent position. She's been, I guess, awaiting this clearance, so it's the annual salary of $57,827. She's a long-term employee of the town, so it's just making her from provisional to permanent now that she's met the grade. The appointment of Anthony Guglielmo, senior grounds worker. This is a vacant position. His annual salary is $45,630. Mr. Guglielmo has been working primarily in a part-time and relief capacity for very many years, but this is a vacant position that he'll be occupying. The next three are D, E, and F are the appointment of the final members to the newly formed Architectural and Historic Review Board. For the members of the public that don't typically come to our meetings in the past, we had a discussion, we had a public hearing. We actually eliminated the Historic Review Board and the Architecture and Landscape Commission and merged these two boards into one, fairly significant savings to the taxpayer. We've also done it to be able to ensure that we are placing folks on these boards that have particular expertise. And given that this is the Architecture and Historic Review Board, Mr. Keegler has been a long-term member of the Historic Review Board, so he's moving on to the new board. We've appointed Barbara Hess, who is an architect from West Nyack. I think it's appropriate to have an architect on the Architecture and Historic Review Board. And we've also will be appointing tonight Mr. Stephen Botto as a member of the Architecture and Historic Review Board. He's a business owner, landscaper, and I think he's the president of the Landscape Association of Rockland County. So again, some fairly qualified people that we're appointing to the new board. In addition to that, the annual salary for these positions is $2,600, which is roughly $3,000 cut from the fee for the people who are being paid for the prior Architecture and Landscape Commission. So not only did we eliminate 7 positions, but we cut the salary in half of the existing board. So it's savings of about $40,000 per year with everything that we've done with this new board. And then the last two, we accept with regret and thank them for their service to the town of Clarkstown. The resignation by retirement of Kevin Shannon, who has been a long-term police officer in the Clarkstown Police Department, and the resignation by retirement as well of Jackie Van Bauer, who had been a principal clerk typist within the CDA and worked in the Public Works Department upstairs. Resolution number 12, authorizing the supervisor to enter into the following agreements with the Board of Education for Rockland Bossies, Clarkstown Central School District B, Nanuet School District C, and the Nye School District B for the School Resource Officer Program. Mr. Schofield, can you speak to these? These officers are going to provide security, surveillance, and email members of the school district on the presence. Okay. And any questions from members of the board on this? So these are annual agreements with the school districts with the school resource officer. Correct. Resolution number 13, authorizing the appointment of William Harrington, Esquire, Bleakley, Platt, and Schmidt as special counsel to handle police disciplinary matter, with the fees ranging from $200 to $250 per hour, and paralegal field fees of $100 per hour. Mr. Toomey, can you speak to this? And Mr. Schofield.
Yes, good evening. This resolution was one that was vetted by the town attorney, who could not be here tonight, Lino Sharetta. This is a disciplinary proceeding involving a member of the police department who otherwise is a party to numerous litigations involving the town. As such, it would be inappropriate for anyone in the town attorney's office to be prosecuting that case, which necessitated the retention of a special counsel to serve as a prosecutor in that case. The individual who again was vetted by the town attorney's office is a very accomplished litigator. I believe his office is in White Plains, a very well-known member of the bar and well qualified for this position.
Thank you. Mr. Stoker, do you have anything to add? No, this is correct. Any questions from members of the board on agenda item number 13? Okay, agenda item number 14, the appointment of the hearing officer for a disciplinary hearing. Again, could you speak to that?
Yes, Mr. Supervisor. This is a resolution which delegates the authority of the town board, which in the town of Clarkstown serves as the Board of Police Commissioners. It's one and the same, one entity. Under the Rockland County Police Act, a hearing officer can be appointed in a disciplinary case. The hearing officer would conduct a full fact-finding type hearing. He would prepare findings and recommendations which would be submitted to the town board for its ultimate determination of the case. This is the standard protocol in police disciplinary cases, resulting from a case arising out of the town of Orange County a number of years ago, where the Court of Appeals approved this type of procedure for police disciplinary cases. So the individual appointed in this case also was vetted by the Office of the Town Attorney. Is Dennis Vacco, who's a former Attorney General of New York State. The credentials for this position was to have someone who was also an esteemed member of the bar with substantial experience in litigation, but also someone that didn't have any local ties to the community. It's obviously, as we can tell by the size of the audience tonight, a very sensitive case, and it was thought that having someone who was a local attorney serving as a hearing officer could lead to various conflicts. So for that reason, someone who was well credentialed but outside of both town government and even Rockland County was deemed to be appropriate. So Mr. Vacco was nominated as the hearing officer to conduct this particular disciplinary case.
And his fees were a standard fee that we've had in other police disciplinary matters of $300 per hour?
Yes, that's correct. We have other pending cases, and that same rate has been established as appropriate for these particular cases.
Any questions from members of the board?
I do have a question. Mr. Toomey, you mentioned that standard protocol was followed in terms of picking who the hearing officer would be. What would be standard protocol for the town? Is there, I know for 207C, which for those of you who know or don't know, is our an officer who goes out in line of duty, right? There's a list, I believe, of hearing officers that we have for that. I don't know if there is one for disciplinary matters, but what generally is our protocol?
Sure, I can answer that, Councilwoman. Until about 6 to 7 years ago, the procedure that you mentioned for 207C cases, which pertain to police disability matters, was very similar to what applied in disciplinary cases. However, at that time, the New York State Court of Appeals, our highest court, issued that decision coming out of Orange County, which found that it was illegal and against public policy to delegate the authority in a disciplinary case outside of the town. So in those other cases, you would have a list of arbitrators that would be selected by both the union and by the town, and they would serve as a panelist of hearing officers. That was found to be appropriate in that context for disability, but not for discipline. So since the Orange Town case, not only your town, but others in this position, now have to internally select a hearing officer. So really now it's a much more informal process. It's done only by one side, and that's pursuant to the Court of Appeals ruling. It's not something where both sides have any say in the selection of the hearing officer.
Right, but that's, it answers some of my question. The other part of the question, I guess, is in previous disciplinary matters, since I guess the Judges 2 and 3 before, how would the town attorney's office normally select the would requirements that they have experience in being a hearing officer or in labor law or police matters be something that we might consider in these cases when picking hearing officers? And were those things considered in picking this particular hearing officer?
The court's spoken to that as well, but it's required for any hearing officer in a disciplinary case is that the person be fair and impartial. You don't have to be a labor lawyer. You don't have to be trained in a particular area of the law. But what you have to be is someone who has no prior knowledge of the facts. You can't go through life people who are.
Listen. I know there's lots of people that want to speak. Let's get through this. Allow the attorney, and if people want to make comments, I'd ask them to make them respectfully and in the appropriate time. Allow the attorney to speak.
Thank you. So, to directly answer your question, you do not have to be a labor lawyer or a judge. What you have to do is you have to have great knowledge of litigation. You should know a lot about administrative law, and probably very few people in the state would have more knowledge of administrative law than a former attorney general. So this would be someone who would be in the highest echelon of qualifications, although not necessarily as a hearing officer.
Okay, so that sort of it doesn't quite answer my question. My question is not directed at what this decision says of the qualifications of a hearing officer, but what do we, as the town of Clarkstown, have we taken into account in terms of hearing officers in the past? Normally, do we, I mean, and I know you haven't been a town attorney here for very long, but maybe Paul has a response, but how do we normally consider, are these things that we're normally looking for in someone who's going to fill in this role to have the experience where they are familiar with police issues and where they have an understanding of labor law? And yes, the Attorney General of the state of New York has an understanding a little bit of all kinds of law, but that's not what I'm asking. I'm not going to the qualifications of him as Attorney General. Frankly, he won an election and he served the job. That was years ago. Fine, great. My question is, what do we normally exact same requirements for this particular hearing?
The answer is yes. I'm happy to say disciplinary cases within the town of Clarkstown Police Department that get to a hearing are relatively rare. Since the Orangetown case, again, I've only been here roughly about 6 or 7 months now. But even looking back at the history of the cases, these are relatively rare. There were a lot of cases pre-Orangetown that went to arbitration. Since that time, at least in the last 6 or 7 months, there have been 2 other cases, and it was the exact same procedure that was followed, looking for someone who is a well-qualified attorney that has familiar matters and police matters and administrative procedures. Those are the 2 essential elements, not necessarily that you wear a designation. With all due respect to our town, it would be very hard to argue that a former Attorney General for the state, who I believe is also a federal prosecutor, would not be impeccably well qualified. So the process itself, the selection, has been followed consistently, albeit on a very narrow basis. There have only been a small handful of these cases. Thankfully.
Mr. Toomey, maybe you can also speak for Mr. Schofield. One of the things that was also important, obviously, with a case of this nature and something this sensitive, was to ensure that there was no conflict and a number of folks that might typically be brought in would have knowledge potentially or would have already done work with the town of Clarkstown. This is a gentleman that's not known to any members of the town board or known to have done any work within the town of Clarkstown. My understanding is he lives in Buffalo, so he's on the other end of the state, and he's not even within the same media market, so presumably somebody that would have, not have any connections whatsoever, which is also something that is important within this, because the gentleman has to be fair because he's got a lot of thoughts.
Right. To my knowledge, no member of the town board has any personal relationship with this individual. He's someone who obviously is very well known, but not well known on a personal level to the members of the town board. What we're looking for, just as the supervisor indicated, was neutrality, someone fair and someone well qualified. I think you have the right person for that role. It is important that on the other pending cases that we have within Clarkstown, and there are 2 currently, and certainly I wouldn't be addressing the merits of any of these cases, that would be inappropriate in this forum. There was 1 hearing officer selected, but he's already conducting those 2 cases for the town. Based upon serving as a hearing officer on those other cases, it would be very likely that he would be privy to information that could be pertinent to this case as well. That hearing officer, who is otherwise very well qualified and has been appointed by this board on prior occasions, wasn't seen as suitable for this particular case. Again, he's a very good hearing officer, but not in this particular case because he did not fit the criteria of not knowing anyone on the town board or any of the players involved.
I just have one more question.
Yes.
I might wait till later to ask more, but
I'm happy to take them.
sure.
Whatever we need.
You mentioned that no one on the town board has any relationship with him. Are you aware if anyone that works for the town or a current or former police officer for the town has any relationship with him?
Not to my knowledge.
Any additional questions, Ms. Allen?
Not right now.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So, resolution number 15, which is, resolution number 15, amending resolution number 323 of 2016. There was a typographical error about a sign, and this is to install stop signage and stop line on the southwest side of Logan Avenue at the intersection of Upper Depew Avenue and Central Avenue. Any questions from members of the board on that? Resolution number 16, authorizing amending of the budget. I asked our town controller to be able to explain this.
Yes, there's 2 budget amendments on the resolution. The first one, we're fortunate to receive proceeds from seized property of $7,587. And with that, we'll be increasing our revenue account for seized property and appropriating that $7,587 in a fees for services in the police budget. Second item moves funding to the budget line that is needed from one that can afford it, basically. That will be decreasing expense account for the police maintenance agreements and increasing the expense appropriation for police computer hardware in the amount of $53,471.
Any questions for members of the board on that? Okay, resolution number 17 is reestablishing policy for use of town-owned vehicles. This is a change in the policy. I want to thank Councilman Adrian Carey for all of her efforts on this, who had done some work on this and made a recommendation. And what we're recommending tonight, and the new policy will be significant curtailing of the use of take-home vehicles 24/7. It does not speak to the police department. The police department will operate under its own policies, and that those will be reviewed along with police administration. But this is everybody outside of the police department, and we're going from the prior policy had up to 17 stated titles of individuals that had take-home vehicles. We're now eliminating that all but our fire safety inspector, our assistant fire safety inspector, and the seasonal use is going to be granted to the highway maintenance supervisors from November 1st through March 31st. So we're going to be eliminating the 24/7 take-home for a very large number of people within the town. In addition to that, there are some specific prohibitions that are now added to the policy because there had been some concern in the past that some folks were actually using their vehicles, town vehicles, to attend political fundraisers, to collect petition signatures. There's even reports in the past of people using town vehicles to help with the installation of signs for political campaign purposes. Any political activity is strictly prohibited under this new policy, and we're also tightening up and ensuring that all vehicles have fuel rings so that we can monitor the fuel usage closely. So those are the pertinent changes. And again, I want to thank Councilwoman Adrian Carey for her recommendation. Any questions of the members of the board on this?
Resolution number 18 is and I do apologize to members of the public for these last two. It's been our policy not to add items at the very last minute, but our town attorney came to me earlier today and indicated that this was slated to be on the agenda and somehow fell off the agenda. And it's actually, I asked him to explain it, but it's really accepting road widening for subdivision. Maybe Mr. Schofield, you can explain it?
Exactly what it says, accepting a road widening. There's a subdivision taking place on Bardonia Road, and it's a 3-lot subdivision. As part of the subdivision process, the applicant or the owner is going to give us a portion of that property so we can widen the street.
So this will, in order to do this, it will enable the property owner to move forward, and the town will actually be receiving. Perhaps we can open the doors to the back if you see it. So, yeah, please. Thank you. So we're taking a portion of the property from the property owner to enable them to move forward. The resolution number 19 is having a additional town board meeting scheduled for August 23rd at 7:30, 2 weeks from tonight, up in room 301. And I think that's for additional personnel and budgetary matters. Okay. Those are the resolutions. At this point, if there's anybody in the public that would like to speak on any of the resolutions, now we do have a sign-in sheet. Can I have the sign-in sheet? And this is general public comment. So I'm assuming that the sign-in sheet is for just general public comment. So we'll take you right here in the front there. If you come up, identify yourself. And again, anybody that's coming up to speak on the agenda items, these are just the agenda items. If you please come up, identify yourself for the record, and we'll answer any questions at the end.
Thank you. I am Antonia Sambetsky. I'm a member of Clarkstown, a resident of Clarkstown. And I appreciate the fact that Orangeburg set the rule on how to pick a hearing officer, but I'm guessing that in Orangetown, the town board didn't make such a questionable disciplinary action, and so I don't think that the town board should be the ones who are choosing the same hearing officer. Perhaps we can find an ethical ethics board here in Clarkstown to review that. And Stephanie Hausner, thank you for your questions.
In the back.
Good evening, Mr. Supervisor, members of the board, members of the public. My name is Stephen Levine. I reside in the hamlet of Congers. Just a few quick items on resolution items. Let's start with number 8, to purchase for back taxes the one former Goldberg property, the still contaminated site. I just have a question. I don't understand where $240,000 came from, because I know Mr. Goldberg owes about 15, 20 grand in back taxes. I know the town, and the former town attorney Mealy placed a lien for the partial cleanup, which is about $197,000. So what I'd like to know is, why are we paying $240,000? I need some clarity on that. And secondly, please be advised that as soon as that check is issued, I will be making a FOIL request, because we have made it very clear, Mr. Rocco and myself and the other residents of Massachusetts Avenue, not one dime should go to Mr. Goldberg that caused this grief to all of us. Secondly, I have a question on the the appointment of Mr. Harrington, the hearing officer. The way I see it, that's about, $400 to $600 per hour for this council. I do not see any cap on it. I'm very curious to see, typically in legal agreements, there is an estimate that shall not exceed a certain amount. I don't see that. I'm a little concerned about that. And thirdly, I'd just like to say I've been coming to town board meetings for well over 25 years. I've been here in previous administrations, Supervisor Gromack, Supervisor Holbrook. I've been here with other police chiefs. I've never seen anything like this in my life. I have never seen a police chief be brought up on what I consider spurious and unfounded charges. I only have 3 minutes, folks. I only have 3 minutes at a time. Okay? And, what really concerns me is that from what I see in the newspapers, this is something, at best, he did not follow a direction to take the lead detective off a politically sensitive case, but eventually did. And all of a sudden, he's allegedly incompetent after 32 years on the job. I find this puzzling. I don't know why we came to this point so rapidly. It seemed to me there were other ways. And quite frankly, I've never seen this in my 25 years of coming to a town board meetings, anything happen like this to a police chief. So again, I know everybody is proceeding on course, but I'm spared in mind, folks. These attorneys at $300 to $600 an hour, that's coming out of our pockets. Now, if it was coming out of the town board's pockets, which certain legal cases are, it may make one reluctant to initiate litigation. As someone that has gone through a lot of spurious litigation on myself and Mr. Rocco, I know very well what it's like to burn somebody else out with unfounded litigation, especially when the other party doesn't have to pay a dime out of their pocket. Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to speak on an agenda item? In the back, right here. And then in the back, you come up.
Thank you, board members, for allowing me to speak. My name is Rich Kopanek. I've been a member of the Rockland County community for over 59 years, in Clarkstown for over 30 years, and a member of the Rockland County law enforcement community for over 31 years. I served on the SWAT team and critical incident response team in Orangetown. I have been a founding member of the Rockland County and Orangetown Police Motorcycle Units. I also serve on the Rockland County Critical Incident Debriefing Team. And in the years that I've served, I've known Mike Sullivan not as a personal friend, but as somebody I had to work with. And I have to say, in my numerous interactions with him in all of the venues that I've just mentioned, I have found him to be a member of the community and police community with undaunting integrity, dedication, and I can't believe that he would ever serve this town or the police community in a way that was not in keeping with the finest respect for both. I served with him as a patrolman. I worked with him as a sergeant, first line supervisor. I had to work with him as a supervisor and chief, and he always treated me with the utmost respect and dignity, and I feel he always served his police department, which is probably one of the foremost police departments in the state and in the country, and they didn't get that distinguished mark by being led by somebody who didn't do the right thing all the time. I have to say that I'm really concerned at the amount of money that they're going to spend to investigate this. I think the town board could have done something a little bit preemptive to this. And I don't know all the details of the investigation and what the allegations were, but again, I have the undaunting support from Mike as an individual, as a police officer, and as a community member.
My name is Brian Callahan. I'm a longtime resident of the town of Clarkstown, lifetime resident actually, and a member of the Clarkstown Police Department as well as the PBA. I would like to take this time to comment on resolution number 13 and 14. We as the PBA understand disciplinary charges have been preferred against the chief, and that disciplinary process must play itself out. The PBA's concern today, as it has been since the town's disciplinary process was adopted in 2012, is that disciplinary process is not fair. The process in which the town prefers charges on an officer, then selects a hearing officer of their choice, and ultimately makes the final determination on the punishment of the officer, regardless of the hearing officer's finding or recommendations, is hardly a fair and impartial system. In point, there have been many articles recently in the paper, as well as on social media, surrounding the chief's suspension. Many of the articles report a connection between members of this town board and the Westchester County Executive, Rob Astorino. Yet the town board, acting as the police commission, has chosen attorney William Harrington, a Westchester-based attorney with strong ties to Rob Astorino, as the special prosecutor in the chief's disciplinary hearing. With all this being reported, it seems highly inappropriate and raises many questions as to the town's choice of counsel. Now that the chief's disciplinary case has been brought to the public, individuals, Supervisor Holman and the town board, acting as the police commission, directed Chief Sullivan to remove Sergeant Colatcher from his position as coordinator of the Rockland County Strategic Intelligence Unit and reassign him to other police duties. Supervisor Holman ordered Chief Sullivan to carry out this directive regardless of any wrongdoing or disciplinary action taken against Stephen Colatcher. If this is not troubling enough, on July 29, 2016, Chief of Staff Vincent Palacio is quoted in the Journal News as saying, and I quote, "When Colatcher got caught leaking information, as of today, no charges have been levied against Sergeant Colatcher, yet your Chief of Staff has publicly accused Sergeant Colatcher of wrongdoing without due process." We as the PBA feel this statement is irresponsible and damaging to the character of a member of our organization. The PBA believes the recent actions of the town board raise many questions by both the police department and the residents of our town. The PBA requests the board seek advice of qualified law enforcement professionals before making further decisions regarding the Clarkstown Police Department. These are trying times for law enforcement, and there is no room for rash decisions or political gamesmanship. Thank you.
Who else would like to speak? Anybody else? Oh, yeah.
My name is Judy Barchuk. I've lived in Rockland for over 40 years. My children have gone to school here, pay taxes, and I'd like to address the item 13 regarding Mr. William Harrington as special counsel in a police matter. There seems to be a long line of appointments associated to Westchester County. And County Executive Rob Astorino, there has been large sums of money donated by Mr. Marshall Garvey to the Reform Party. In addition, town attorneys were let go by the administration, and the offices filled with attorneys from guess where? Westchester County. When the town decided to hire a firm to conduct a study of police department, and the group has no experience regarding the police administration. This group also took 2 police officers from Westchester County as consultants, and one of the police officers was appointed by guess who? Rob Escarino. Are there any individuals in the town of Clarkstown, or that matter, Rockland County, without ties to Rob Escarino? Could you please kindly reply to the representative at this meeting, and maybe the Journal News? They might be here. Thank you.
Comment, on the agenda items. We have public comment at the end as well, because we actually have a list of folks that we're kind of jumping over, because I was under the impression people wanted to speak directly to a particular item. Excuse me, thank you. So that being said, rather than just calling it indiscriminately, then I'm assuming that everybody signed up wants to speak about agenda item 13 or 14. So, Brian Gorski, would you like to speak? Is it about an agenda item, or you want to wait till the end of the meeting? It is not. All right, so then the end of the meeting.
Okay.
The next one is Ray Lachette.
Mine's not on the agenda.
Okay. Paula Vaccarelli. Come up.
Good evening. My name is Paula Vaccarelli. I've been a Clarkstown resident for about 45 years, and pretty much have voted in every election that I could vote in. I've never spoken at a meeting like this before, pretty much because I've never felt the way I feel right now. And how I feel now is really angry, really disgusted, and very disappointed in this town board. I am angry and upset and disappointed that at a time like this of unprecedented unrest and danger, this town board suspends Michael Sullivan, our chief of police, and at the same time, he removes the head of the intelligence unit. The town board removed the head of the intelligence unit. It's obvious to me, and I'm sure to lots of other folks here, that the town board is putting their political agenda before the needs and safety of the residents and those who So I guess I have a two-part question. Have you, the town board, taken any steps to determine what the impact of your order has been on public and officer safety? And if not, why not? Thank you.
The next speaker is Julia Barshak. I'm sorry. And Rob Clements. And the meeting, okay. Mr. Adelson, are you on this now? And the meeting. Ms. Hook?
March from the city. I would also disciplinary officer. Some of the charges brought against Chief Sullivan are misconduct, insubordination, failure to perform duty, inappropriate behavior. I foiled for the minutes of the meeting where Chief Sullivan was suspended, and the foil that I got back said, "Please be advised, no record exists." According to the open meeting laws, you're supposed to have, number one, the town clerk at the meeting where a decision is made, and there are supposed to be minutes taken at any meeting where a decision is.
First question I was asked was, how do you feel about Supervisor Holman? 1, favorable. 2, not favorable.
Excuse me, which agenda item is this addressed?
This is, I have Mr. Harrington and Mr. Bacco's name in my little speech here. The next question stated, how do you feel about Chief Michael Sullivan? Again, 1, favorable, 2, not favorable, 3, no opinion. The third question said, how would you feel about Chief Michael Sullivan if, and it was a very negative comment, and I hung up the phone. And it came from Republican headquarters at 845-634-7100. Okay. Now, as a resident of Clarkstown, I'm very upset by the recent suspension of Police Chief Michael Sullivan. It disturbs me that Mr. Holman and the town board initiated this action. I find you, Mr. Holman, a very respectable man, as well as Mr. Sullivan, a very respectable man, both men whom I admire. However, I feel you don't need a Mr. Harrington or a Mr. Bacco. What you need is to communicate, you and Mr. Sullivan, no attorneys. Go down the hall, go in a room, talk over your differences. And we will wait here for both of you to walk out with your heads held high, your differences put aside, and once again prove to me and the other residents of Clarkstown that you can and will work together for the good of the people of Clarkstown.
The next speaker is Sandra Siegel.
End the meeting.
Christian Cortelli.
End the meeting, please.
And Adele Regis.
Agenda item 14. Good evening, town supervisor, council members, and everybody in the room. First and foremost, my name is Adele Regis, longtime Clarkstown resident, and also a board member of the NAACP NAACP branch. However, I want to state for the record that I'm actually speaking merely as an individual. Like most people in this room, I can neither boast a lengthy relationship with the chief, nor do I have the luxury of the time to actually do so. However, it's fair for me to say that I know him long enough to actually vouch for his name tonight. The chief and I, we both sit on a panel, monthly panel, where we actually get to discuss issues within the African American community here in Rockland. And those panels, pretty much, we identify those issues which may potentially create a rift between the African American and Latino community. in the police department here. So consider this, these are after hours, like this is after the chief's hour, right? But he still comes to long meetings where he oftentimes he's on the receiving end of our often very passionate and lengthy comments and objections to the intricacies of police procedures. But I'll tell you this, the chief has always, like patiently, like I've yet to see the chief miss a single meeting. The chief has always been there, patiently listened to us, even when we run our time. And on top of that, he listens to us, and he helps while we're creating solutions pretty much to build community relations here in Rockland, and to prevent a Baton Rouge or Ferguson to actually happen here in our own backyard. Wow, we got 2 minutes left in my clock. So, needless to say, this man right here, he's a valuable asset to our community, especially in time right now when we're dealing with a national crisis, where due to the heightened tension between black and blue community. So, I urge you, town supervisor, I urge you, any other council members, please consider reinstating this man, restoring back to his former position, because a lot of us are pretty disappointed and pretty upset. Thank you.
Is there anyone else wishing to speak on the agenda? Okay, so let me address what I can address, and then I'll have our attorneys address the additional information. So on matters of process, and let me first start off by saying, you know, this is a difficult time. I understand that for a lot of folks, and I appreciate Chief Sullivan's service to our community. My turn to respond. And you may, excuse me. With all due respect, let's treat each other with decorum. We appreciate it. I appreciate the chief's long service to our community. I appreciate the service of all law enforcement to our community. The rules of the department apply to everybody. And again, it's my turn for the microphone. And again, let me just be clear. I didn't invent the process. This town board didn't invent this process. This room wasn't filled when we appointed hearing officers last month for additional matters. The rules of the department apply to everybody. There's a process that's in place. I'd like to see the process move forward quickly and fairly for all parties concerned. And I appreciate everybody's comments here. Unfortunately, there's not an awful lot that any of us are going to be able to say based on what our attorneys have discussed, and we're going to defer, I guess, to the process to answer some of these questions to our attorneys, Mr. Schofield and Mr. Toomey, and what have you. So the questions that came up outside of this, Mr. Levine, you had raised issues about the agenda item regarding the property at Massachusetts Avenue. It's interesting, you've been pushing for us to acquire this property now tonight, and you're questioning the cost. The county, that's what the county's on. Mr. Goldberg's not getting that money. That's based on the liens that the county has placed on the property. So we're acquiring the property from the county, and it's for what's deemed the liens that the county has placed on it. And that's what the cost is, $240,000. And again, I know you've been pushing along with Mr. Rocco for us to acquire this property for some time. And Mr. Goldberg, you know, has already lost that property. It's already owned by the county. So that's money that's owed for the taxes and what have you. And the liens are placed on the property to the county, so we're acquiring that. As it relates to, I think everything else, I'm going to ask our attorneys to address because of the lengthy process. Mr. Toomey, maybe you could speak a little bit to the process again.
Yes, thank you. I think the most, thank you.
Can you speak particularly to the, again, and I'm just going to ask, please, people most people here, again, let's just be clear. Most people in this room obviously disagree with some decisions that have taken place. That's your right. That's your right. But you don't have the right to come to the public meeting and act in a manner that's not respectful. And in addition to that, it's your right to be able to come out and voice your opinion. That's the American way. And we appreciate that, and we take your comments down, and they're noted, and we'll answer whatever else we can possibly answer. But as it relates to this, just because you disagree, with the decision, you please accord respect to the folks that are trying to answer your question. Mr. Toomey, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. The primary areas that I want to cover are the comments made by PBA representative, I think it was Officer Callahan, and those are very good points that he made about the integrity of the process and his view and the view of many unions that the town board should not be in the position to designate the hearing officer and then make the final decision in the case. But again, that is what the law demands. Exactly what Officer Callahan was looking for is the subject of legislation that was proposed before the last 3 or 4 governors. And that would have reinstated the old process under which there can be collective bargaining over the subject with a selection by a panel. The last 3 governors, and I believe 4, all vetoed that legislation, and their veto messages all indicated that they found that to be against the public interest, that the town boards, especially in Rockland County and Westchester County and a couple of others, need to maintain strict control over discipline in police departments. So even if this town board chose to go back to that old system, you could not do so. The current state of the law simply doesn't allow it. So those are fair comments that the officer made, but quite frankly, those are comments for the state legislature and the governor, not for this town board. You are obligated under the Orange County case and a couple of others that have been decided over the years to follow this process. It is a process that the courts have approved because they believe that it's fair, provided again that you have a neutral hearing officer, and our representation to you is that we believe this is a fair and neutral hearing officer. One other point that was made about the fees, it's probably true that everyone in this room agrees on one proposition. No one likes paying legal fees. Probably right after taxes, legal fees would be right there. But the fees that were stated in the resolution, those were read by one speaker in a cumulative way. The range of the hourly fees would be $200 to $250. You don't add them together, it's not billing $400 or $600. Probably doesn't make people feel that much better about the cost of these proceedings, which are substantial, but just so the record is clear on that. Another point that was made was about another case, and we advised the town board it would be inappropriate to comment on any particular disciplinary case or personnel matter in this forum. But a distinction was made about a case where charges have not been brought, but some action was taken. The answer to that, and again by court authority, is that reassignments are fundamentally different from disciplinary proceedings. So any police officer can be reassigned to any position in the department. That's something Chief Sullivan or any other police chief would have done over the years. Town boards have the authority to direct in that area. It's not a disciplinary type of action. One additional point that was made was about the action of the town board, whether or not there should have been a public meeting or a vote on the suspension. That speaker would have been correct had that been a suspension without pay. Under the law, if a town board wishes to suspend any employee without pay, you need legislative approval of that. This was a suspension with pay, which means that the chief still continues to enjoy his full salary and benefits without actually working. So that one would not, whether people approve of it or not is another thing, but that would not require legislative action because it's not investing someone in any property.
And is that been the policy of the town of Clarkstown for an extended period of time?
The town has routinely, at least in the last 3 cases, opted to use the suspension with pay rather than the suspension without pay. A suspension without pay can be appropriate in some cases. It's often appropriate when there's a second set of charges. Amended charges can result in the suspension without pay. But from what I can tell from the short time that I've been here, the usual practice has been that the suspension with pay, which again does not require any legislative action. I think that's essentially the broad spectrum of the points that were raised. Unfortunately, I'm from Long Island, so I'm not so sure what the comments are about everyone being from Westchester, but irrespective of whether or not someone knows a former candidate for a governor of the state doesn't seem to have much to do with disqualifying someone or making them qualified or not qualified. This would be, in a case like this, having someone with these credentials is exceedingly rare. Usually, the complaint is that it's someone that doesn't have great credentials. No one can seriously argue that the 2 individuals that the town board are contemplating appointing tonight are not impeccably credentialed for these appointments.
And Mr. Toomey, could you, again, because I think there's been some misunderstanding within the public, and certainly I think, some of the rhetoric, that's taken place in a lot of different sectors has been unfortunate. We have a long-standing tradition within our country of civilian control of the military and the police. The role of the town board, certainly within the state of New York, as police commission, or serving or acting as the town board in that capacity.
Yes, I'd be happy to. That is an area that leads to a lot of confusion. In a sense, the public knows they're police officers. I agree with the speaker, you happen to have one of the fire police departments in the state, and that's been the tradition here for many, many years, and has continued in recent years, and it continues to this very day. There's an order of succession within the police department, so when a police chief is not available, whether by disability, suspension, vacation, there's always someone else very qualified to step in the interim to make sure that the police department functions efficiently. But what's very important is that's the role of police officers who may be residents see. The town board, or this town board and any town board throughout the state, actually possesses all of the authority over the police department. The law again commands that all rules and regulations of the police department have to be promulgated by the town board, and the chief of police answers to the town board. And that's something that sometimes can lead to some discomfort because, frankly, police chiefs are very well qualified. They have expertise in what they do, but they don't set policy for the police department. The residents of your town elect members of the town board. You wear 2 hats here, essentially. You serve as members of the town board, and you're also the police commissioners. Under that system of governance, which again has been sanctioned by the courts and has really been established in our form of government for really hundreds of years, that's the way it operates. And while people might want that to change in some way, it really doesn't. Even New York City, which is always seen as the model for good police departments, it is a civilian police commissioner that runs that department. Sometimes it would have been a former police officer in that role, but the reality is that civilian control over even the largest police department in the world. There's nothing unusual about this. Sometimes there are decisions by a town board like this one that are controversial, and that's part of the process too. But the reality is that the will of the town board on these matters, because you are elected by the people, is one that has to be respected.
Okay. Do you have anything else to add?
No, if I can just make this sort of general comment, I represent police departments, although this one for a very short period of time, but I've represented police departments for approximately 30 years. I represent police departments that stretch from East Hampton to the Hudson River. This is not particularly unusual, other than the fact that it is the chief of police who is the charged party. That's something that is somewhat unusual. It's very awkward, but as the town supervisor indicated, every member of the department, and I'm sure Chief Sullivan would subscribe to this, is bound by the rules and regulations of the department. No one is above the law in the police department, and in fact, if you think about it, police officers who have the ultimate power in society, they can arrest people, they can deprive people of their liberty, and they exercise that in a very responsible manner, but it assumes that there be some oversight by civilian personnel. And that's what's occurring here, unfortunately, again, at a higher level than what you're used to seeing.
Thank you. I know our town attorney also wanted to weigh in on this, Mr. Schofield, as it relates to the...
I would just agree with Mr. Tooney's statements as far as the outline, as far as the procedure and the process, basically.
So at this point, we can move forward with the resolutions on the agenda. So resolution number 1, accepting minutes of the town board meeting of July 18th.
I just want to make sure for the record that there will be amended town board meeting minutes, because on the original minutes I was present and I was not.
Okay. So I'm sorry, the amended town board minutes for July 18th, as submitted by the town clerk. Moved by Councilman Borelli, second by Councilman Miller. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Resolution number 2, authorizing the supervisor to enter into the following agreement with the AD&C. Moved by Councilman Borelli, moved by Councilman Miller. All those in favor say aye. Resolution number 3, amending resolution number 340 of 2016. Moved by Councilman Miller, second by Councilman Carey. All those in favor say aye. Resolution number 4, adopting a determination of significance under the provisions of 6 NYCRR. Moved by Councilwoman Hauser, second by Councilman Miller. All those in favor say aye. Resolution number 5, amending resolution number 477-2015 regarding the proposed acquisition of property in West Nyack. Moved by Councilman Borelli, second by Councilman Hauser, and Carey. All those in favor say aye. Resolution number 6, granting permission for Indians, moved by Councilman Hauser, second by Councilman Borelli. All those in favor say aye. Resolution number 7, authorizing installation of street lights, moved by Councilman Noto, second by Councilman Carey. All those in favor say aye. Resolution number 8, authorizing the purchase of a tax building parcel from the county of Rockland, moved by Councilman Noto, second by Councilman Carey. All those in favor say aye. Resolution number 9, authorizing the supervisor to accept proposal to enter into an agreement with moved by Councilman Carey, second by Councilman Noto. All those in favor say aye. Resolution number 10, authorizing the settlement of the following tax securing matters. Moved by Councilman Borelli, second by Councilman Hauser. All those in favor say aye. Resolution number 11, A through H, moved by Councilman Borelli, second by Councilwoman Carey. All those in favor say aye. Resolution number 12, authorizing the supervisor to enter into the following agreements, A, B, C, and D for the school resource officer program. Moved by Councilwoman Carey, second by Councilman Noto. All those in favor say aye. Resolution number 13, authorizing the appointment of Wayne Harrington of Leakley and Platt Schmidt as special counsel. Moved by Councilman Noto, second by Councilman Borelli. All those in favor say aye.
Abstain, I'd like to explain my vote, please.
Sure.
So I just want to read briefly, I will be very brief, William Harrington's bio on the website for his law firm. It says Mr. Harrington is chairman of the firm's executive committee. That's very nice. He is the head of the litigation and toxic tort complex litigation practice groups. Mr. Harrington is an experienced trial attorney who has represented Fortune 500 companies in criminal, commercial, environmental, civil rights, real estate, gaming, and employment discrimination matters. His clients have included major oil companies, pharmaceutical companies, hospitals, racetracks, casinos, financial institutions, and significant regional companies in all aspects of complex environmental, toxic tort, and commercial litigation. and he also represents municipalities and land use members. So I'm going to abstain on this vote, and quite frankly, I think, and I know it was mentioned before, I've personally had enough of this Ascarino crap, and I don't see donating $55,000 to Rob Ascarino's campaign, I don't know what his qualifications are for this office.
You're free to vote no.
I would like to abstain.
Thanks. Resolution number 14.
I have a reason for abstaining, and I would ask that people you can grant me the ability to abstain, which I have decided to do. Thank you.
Appointing, resolution number 14, appointing hearing officer for disciplinary hearing, moved by Councilman Noto, second by Councilman Borelli. All those in favor say aye.
Abstain, and I'd like to explain that vote as well. This is another, I've asked several questions before to one of the assistant town attorneys. I had a conversation with the town attorney, who's not here tonight, when he mentioned who the hearing officer would be, and I said, oh, the former attorney general, because I recognize the name. But he said, and I asked if he had any experience, as I mentioned before, in police matters or labor. He said he didn't, but he was the former attorney general, and that's an important feat. Quality is, I have respect for people who've served, and anyone who's been elected to office and served in office, because it's definitely not an easy thing to do. I asked specifically, and again I asked tonight if he had experience being a hearing officer or experience with police disciplinary actions, and the answer was no. So my question is, how come we can't pick someone political? Vincent Blasio, who works for the supervisor, I believe spent a long period of time working for former Governor Pataki, who was the governor at the time that Mr. Vaco was the Attorney General. The reason why I asked my question of whether there are conflicts within the town is because I find it, I don't want to accuse someone of something, but I do find there to be a probable connection, and that concerns me because Mr. Blasio is the same person that has made several misstatements, let's say, to the Journal News, including saying that there was a vote, which we just heard there was no vote, and there was no vote needed. So for all of those reasons, plus probably a few more, I will abstain on this vote as well.
I want to make it clear, Ms. Hausner, that neither myself or anybody else in the town board know Mr. Vaco, have met Mr. Vaco, have had discussions with Mr. Vaco. Similarly, on the prior gentleman, Mr. Harrington, I don't know him, haven't met him, he hasn't contributed to my campaign. These individuals were vetted by the town attorney, and I thank you for your time. Okay, resolution number 15, amending resolution number 323, 2016, moved by Councilman Noto, second by Councilman Borelli. All those in favor say aye. Resolution number 16, authorizing amending the budget, moved by Councilman Houser, second by Councilman Carey. All those in favor say aye. Resolution number 17, reestablishing the policy of use of town vehicles, moved by Councilman Carey, second by Councilman Borelli. All those in favor say aye. Resolution number 18, accepting the deed for road widening. So moved by Councilman Borelli, second by Councilman Noto. All those in favor say aye. Resolution number 19, setting special town board meeting. So moved by Councilman Borelli, second by Councilman Carey. All those in favor say aye. And that concludes our regular agenda items. At this point, I'll go off the list on the folks that would like to speak, and we'll answer your questions at the end on the ones that we're able to answer. So, Mr. Gorski, you're up.
Good evening. My name is Brian Gorski. I live
here in Clarkstown with my wife and 2 children, and I'm proud to be a Clarkstown police officer. I have been in the police department for almost 23 years and am currently assigned to the Information Technology Division as Sergeant. I would like to address some important statements that have been made publicly and make corrections as to their accuracy. On WRCR radio yesterday morning, Supervisor Holman stated that he hoped the actions by the district attorney and other law enforcement agencies do not compromise, quote, the rank and file of consummate professionals in the police department. The truth of the matter is that we are compromised by these actions, and that the actions of the district attorney and other agencies is a direct result of the actions of the town board. Whether intended or not, the actions taken by the town board are hampering the operational effectiveness of the police department. We have made great strides in improving the speed and efficiency through which we deliver mission-critical information to our officers. To have questions arise about the security of our email and other law enforcement agencies refusing to conduct business with us via email severely hampers our efforts. Here are some of the other things Supervisor Holman stated in his radio address yesterday. In reference to the FBI subpoenas, he said that they needed to limit access to those who could potentially delete documents and emails that could be evidence in impending proceedings. People who, quote, who could go after these documents and that documents were disappearing and information was deleted. There's clearly innuendo in those statements that there was potential criminal wrongdoing on the part of the police department, but more specifically that I or my staff could be complicit in that wrongdoing. I find that extremely disrespectful, baseless, and bordering on slander. Just this afternoon, the Rockland County District Attorney confirmed publicly that none of the federal subpoenas named or involved the Clarkstown Police Department or 20 Maple Avenue. This leads us to believe that the town board's statements since January regarding said subpoenas are not true and in fact are quite misleading. In reference to the town's computer network, you have said much more secure than it previously was. Well, I respectfully disagree. We now have unauthorized civilian town employees with criminal records and politicians that have access to confidential police information. Not only is this insecure, but is likely a violation of both federal and state policy and law. He also stated the police department has control of all their own emails. This could not be further from the truth. As you and the town board well know, the majority of our administrative rights were revoked by you back in January of this year, relegating our rights to the most basic functions of resetting email passwords and adding new employees. In addition, you purchased Google Vault that allows you full access unfettered to our email. This was not in place prior to January of this year. Finally, you said yesterday on the radio that you want to work with the police department and make sure we have what we need. Well, what we need is for the town to immediately transfer ownership and control of the clarkstownpd.org domain to the police department and cooperate with us fully to migrate all of our existing email and documents to this new domain. This will allow us to safeguard confidential information and restore other law enforcement agencies and the public's faith that their information is being properly protected. Thank you.
Next speaker is Brandon Jack.
Good evening, Town Board, Supervisor Holman, residents of the town of Clarkstown. My name is Ray Lachette. I'm a lifelong resident of the town of Clarkstown and president of the Clarkstown PBA. Last week, I was informed that District Attorney Tom Zuckerby, Chief Mordica of the Spring Valley Police Department, and Chief Vidal Brown of the Police Department instructed their employees to no longer contact the Clarkstown Police Department via email. Email is a vital link between law enforcement agencies that allows law enforcement agencies to gather and disseminate police information immediately between local, state, and federal agencies. This week, I've also learned that the Suffolk Police Department, under Chief Osborne, and the Orangetown Police Department, Chief Nolte, have also instructed their employees to cease email correspondence with the Clarkstown Police Department. I commend these agencies for taking such warranted actions. The possibility of information containing confidential and sensitive police information being compromised is paramount. There cannot be non-vetted employees who have no security clearance having access to victims' information, personal information pertaining to confidential informants, and other police information. Earlier today, I spoke with District Attorney Tom Zugby in regards to the federal subpoenas. The DA told me he cannot discuss what information was requested in the subpoenas, but he was able to tell me that the federal subpoenas were very specific in nature and that none of the requested information was related to the Clarkstown Police Department or 20 Maple Avenue. District Attorney Zugby's office has firsthand knowledge of the inner workings of these types of investigations and would know whether or not the police department is the subject of this investigation. Second point I have to make is over the past several months, the town board has continuously referred to yourselves as the police commission. Yet no one on the board has any law enforcement background. Immediately as town board or police commission, you called for an efficiency study to be conducted on the Clarkstown Police Department, even though the New York State Department of Criminal Justice would have done the study for free. The town board chose to hire the Bonadea Group and 2 police department liaisons from the Westchester County Police Department at a cost of $96,000. From the onset of the study, the PBA and the Clarkstown Police Department as a whole has fully cooperated and acted professionally while acting with the Bonadea Group. In a recent radio interview and subsequent newspaper articles, Supervisor Holman is quoted as saying, quote, "There has been a delay in information that has been requested from the police administration," end quote. There was another comment that the police department had to create some data following this comment. PBA started investigating after hearing this. I personally contacted the Bonadea Group to see if the Clarkstown PBA could assist them with gaining information that had been delayed.
30 seconds.
I spoke with Timothy Ball, who is the project manager of the police efficiency study. Timothy Ball stated to me that the delay was caused by the massive amount of information that they received from Sergeant Steve Colhatcher in the Strategic Intelligence Police Unit. The Bonadea Group then asked Sergeant Colhatcher for his assistance when analyzing the data. Timothy Ball relayed to me that all information that had been requested from the Clarkstown Police Department was received in a timely manner. On July 22nd, 2016, there was a newspaper article printed in the Journal News. Supervisor Holman released a written statement that said, quote, "It's sad and desperate the lengths that some will go to block change to protect the status quo that has pickpocketed the taxpayer pocket for years." Supervisor Holman, that statement makes the inference that the Clarkstown Police Department has been stealing money from the taxpayers in Clarkstown. We live in tumultuous times right now. In the immediate aftermath of the police assassinations in Dallas, Texas, and Baton Rouge, Louisiana, the Clarkstown Town Board visited each police department roll call and addressed the rank and file and expressed their support for the Clarkstown Police Department. However, Supervisor Holman, your public comments are fanning the flames of distrust of the police department and the police officers. Thank you.
The next speaker is Rob Clemens.
Good evening, Mr. Holman, Council. Quick question. Going to keep this kind of short. Rob Clemens, longtime Clarkstown resident. Quick question. Just want to know, with the email scandals going on throughout the town here, want to know, have you yourself or anybody on your board have at all been prepared to tell me now, have you been reading any police emails that have been going through at this time? And also, number 2, with regards to Mr. Sullivan, Chief Sullivan, if he is so terribly have been done bad here, and what he has done, why is it you offered such a beautiful package for him to step down? Why is it?
The next speaker is Mark Eels.
I don't know how to follow the distinguished town people here. My question is what is your relationship to Mike Hall? It seems that you failed last meeting to announce a suspension of Chief Sullivan, but yet an hour later it appeared on his blog on Facebook. Why is it that we have to find out what's going on in this town through his Facebook page rather than you announcing it? What, are you sleeping with him? Honestly, I want to know if you're paying this guy to announce your decisions.
Mr. Anderson, personal and hominem attacks.
I don't care. I want to know what your relationship to Mike Owens.
Are beneath the dignity of this board.
The dignity is for you to announce when you're going to suspend Chief Sullivan. And yet you didn't last meeting, but yet it appeared on his page. Honestly, you've been disseminating information to him since you were a councilman. When's it stop? Thank you.
Good evening. Kevin Hallinan, resident of Valley Cottage, resident of Rockland for almost 50 years. I'd just like to make one comment relative to what the attorney said about being suspended on full pay and how it can be enjoyed. Let me assure you, any police officer that's ever been around somebody who's been suspended, whether it's full pay at any salary, is not enjoying it. Particularly one who has served for 32 years with distinction in this county. I was a former law enforcement executive with the FBI and with the New York City Police Department. I was the co-commander of the Joint Terrorism Task Force that was the lead unit in the Brinks investigation. I have worked with Clarkstown Police and a number of other agencies here in Rockland County. I've known Michael Sullivan since he was a young man. I knew his dad as well, and still know his dad. A law enforcement family that has served Rockland County for a number of years. I was also serving on leaving law enforcement. I served for 21 years as the Senior Vice President for Security and Facility Management for Major League Baseball. I traveled all over the United States, worked with every single chief of police in at least 40 or 50 different cities where we had major league clubs, spring training, etc. I've been to Japan, Australia, I've been all over the world and working with those police officers as well. I also work as on the board for St. Thomas Aquinas College. I am on the Criminal Justice Advisory Committee, as is a number of police chiefs here in Rockland County, our sheriff and district attorney, Tom Zuckerby, the district attorney from New Jersey as well, Northern New Jersey. We work very closely with the criminal justice students at STAC. And I have to tell you that Chief Michael Sullivan is probably one of the most influential members of our Criminal Justice Advisory Committee. His presentations, when he gets up there, you can't hear a pin drop. He is unbelievable. And what he is as a role model to these young people, men and women, looking to come into criminal justice. I have to tell you, with all the chiefs of police that I've dealt with throughout my career in law enforcement and in private security, Michael Sullivan is one of the finest, intelligent, hardworking, dedicated. He loves this community.
Sandra Spiegel.
Hi, Sandra Spiegel, New City. I'm here to support Chief Sullivan. He has been, in my opinion, one of the best police chiefs we have, and he's always been responsive and following through, including the fact that he's probably the only one in this county that has started the online questions and had two-hour sessions this year via Facebook. So he could speak with the community and answer their questions. Your chief of staff, George, has told in the Journal News, in probably the same article that the other gentleman was referring to, that the other administration used petty personality politics. Well, that's what I believe you're doing. You know, these are trumped-up charges. They should not. You should be able to speak with someone. You are not motivating people. You are being disingenuous with all of the lies that you have made, that you've started. You ran a campaign on a ward vote that the Board of Elections was going to divide the lines. You trusted them then, now you don't. Okay, you've also lied about the email. You lied about the unanimous vote, that there was no, what we're hearing is there was no vote, and Adrian Carey also went on Facebook and posted that there was a unanimous vote and that Stephanie agreed with it. Well, what's the truth? Did you agree with it or didn't you? Did you know what was going on? We'd like to know. Okay, you are, in my opinion, you are doing this because your friend who allegedly donated a lot of money, Mike Garvey, and he didn't get his job back, and you're the one, Emberly, who voted no against having him terminated. That's the reason why you're going after Mike. Okay? You should not be doing this. You should learn how to be a manager. You're trying to hurt a decent man's reputation. Why don't you grow up and do what you were voted in by the people, because you're not doing what the people voted for.
The next speaker is Christian Cortelli.
Maybe we can use some of that money we're saving from the lights to get air conditioning in here. Good evening, my name is Christian Cortelli. I'm a Clarkstown police officer and I live in New City. Last November, I voted for some of the members sitting up here tonight. I would like to quickly describe my background because some of the members of the community have questioned my motives for being a Clarkstown police officer. I became a police officer because my father's a police officer. I worked in New York City for 5 years, including September 11, 2001. Because of what I saw that day, I enlisted in the Marine Corps and fought with infantry in Fallujah, Iraq. I am here today because I have a simple request. Allow the police officers of Clarkstown to continue to do our jobs to the best of our ability by returning our intelligence unit to operational status and returning the chief to full duty. Recent events have shown that police officers have unfairly become the symbols, in their words, the oppression in a racist criminal justice system and have been singled out and assassinated in places like Dallas and Baton Rouge. Firearm-related deaths to law enforcement have increased by 75%. None of which affects our desire to continue to protect the citizens, all citizens of Clarkstown. With all this going on in the country, the Clarkstown Police Department has been asked to protect the citizens of Clarkstown without their chief of police and without a functioning intelligence unit. The intelligence unit allows us to allocate time, money, and other resources to proactive investigations and keep up-to-date information on community happenings, rumors, and the latest counterterrorism reports. Although the board's intent may be changed to personnel in the department, they have effectively shut down the intelligence unit and the leadership element of the department. The absence of leadership will continue until the conclusion of the investigation and administrative hearing. The suspension and transfer of these two individuals does not address the direction of the department in the interim. It simply makes the police force blind until the completion of a bureaucratic process. The intelligence unit and our chief are the head of the police department, and to cut them both at the same time leaves the department
in a dangerous direction, which is to say will be effectively directionless. The changes need to be made. The officers of Clarkstown, as public servants just like yourselves, will follow orders like we always have. But to send us out to do our jobs, scattered and institutionally blind, is to cut effectiveness across the board. Many talk of community policing as if it happens on an individual level. That's true, but it also happens on an institutional level. Proactive investigations are help driven by data and trends. Community residents must understand that the police are not just a band-aid force, but an organized and effective force for the benefit of the community, acting in a concerted effort to reduce crime and disorder before it happens. This is the role the intelligence unit and the chief play in our police department. I have a simple request. Please give us back our intelligence unit and reinstate the chief while the disciplinary process plays out, so we can continue to protect the citizens of Clarkstown, and so I can come back here in 2 years and I can say I voted for members of the board because they can be counted on for supporting their police department and protecting members of the community, including my family. Thank you.
I think that concludes everyone on the list. Is there anyone else wishing to speak?
Dan Carrera, New City. On July 29, 2016, Low HUD reported that Supervisor Holman stated he was acting on behalf of the Board of Police Commissioners in bringing charges against Chief Sullivan. However, on April 27, 2004, Resolution number 354-2004 was passed by the Clarkstown Town Board, which partially states, "Be it resolved that the Town Board of the Town of Clarkstown hereby abolishes the Police Commission effective immediately. Be it further resolved that the Town Board hereafter shall and does hereby assume all of the responsibilities previously held by the Police Commission pursuant to the Rockland County Police Act." Also on April 27, 2004, Resolution number 355-2004 was passed, stating that the Town Board hereby creates a part-time civil service position to be titled and classified by the Rockland County Commissioner of Personnel to assist the Town Board in the exercise of the powers as conferred by the Rockland County Police Act, with said new position to provide the Town Board, acting in lieu of the Police Commission, with assistance with communicating and receiving information, carrying out administrative details, providing analysis as requested, and assistance in the monitoring of information and operational activities of the department. My question is, did this newly formed Town Board receive equivalent or any training whatsoever as described above to act as Town Board members serving in a Police Commission capacity? If no, how can they possibly be qualified to serve in the Police Commissioner capacity? It has also been reported that the findings and recommendations from the hearing officer in the disciplinary proceedings are not binding. The Town Board makes the final determination. If this is the case, it is my opinion this board is in violation of Section 7 of the amended Rockland County Police Act of 1936, which states, "No person who shall have preferred such charges or any part of the same shall sit as judge upon such hearing or trial." So far this year, this board, consisting of council members with only months or even weeks of experience, have proclaimed themselves to be experts in drawing ward lines by amending the ward system referendum voted on by thousands of Clarkstown residents. They also became expert police commissioners, and now they want to anoint themselves judges too. What's next?
Good evening. For the record, I'm one of the guys who was a predecessor of Mike Sullivan. I'm Kevin Kilduff, past chief. And I would say to the newest members of the board, Adrian, John, I think you've been getting fed a lot of, to put it mildly, bovine scatology. Right? You might want to watch this what's coming at you. Frank, I expected better of you. Stephanie, thank you for what you're doing. I got to tell you, I think you've shown Mike, his family, his office, and the PD no respect at all. The Sullivan family has given 70 years to this town. We have traditions. You two kind of mentioned them. I don't know what traditions you two were talking about. The rest of us in the police department know them. Flipper and Michael, they've given this town an awful lot. For instance, they're both members of the Honor Guard. Mike and Flip have been long-serving members. After 9/11, those guys buried 27 New York City firemen. And they were 6 hours after the tower came down. We had 25 members of our department at ground zero, damn near basically being afraid they were going to die. That was my worst day as the chief. I thought I was sending 25 of our people down there to die. Those are the kind of traditions that Mike Sullivan's lived with, okay? I'm sure you're not going to like this. This is coming at you hard. I'm hearing, Mr. Supervisor, that you have personal issues and real antagonistic family history. Well, the CPD, we've been at your house many times when you were younger. I think you have a revenge with us. You seem to be not using social media, computers, every other thing. Hang on, George. I got the podium. Vicious smear that your brother Joe, the convicted felon, has out there. It attacks Bill Sherwood, one of my successors as chief of police, and his son. It attacked my very, very good friend, Jim Doyle, Detective Sergeant Jim Doyle. We passed Shields president, an instructor up at RCC, and just one heck of a guy. He was thought so well of around here, they named the golf tournament after him. He died of a brutal cancer, and his son, Andrew, whom your brother really took to task, was a suicide. Joe, I haven't heard you refute any of that stuff. JJ, it still makes me wonder, really what you're thinking about the Clarkstown police and what your family thinks. When I saw you early last fall, you were campaigning out in front of David's Bagels, and you were complaining about Alex Gromac's $860,000 campaign chest. You told me you're going to run an open, transparent administration. Well, let's see some honest disclosure, George, because I hear there's about 200,000 that you've been out there under your control. You've already brought one lawsuit to the town, and DCJS, Department of Criminal Justice Services, did that kind of study that you want. They do it for nothing, all right? So you're costing the town for that study, and those people accredit police departments. That's a study that will cost us nothing, all right? So it seems to me we're beholden to a lot of people in Westchester. I really wonder why. Power can be power can be a dangerous drug, George. I suggest you check your motives and intentions. I don't know anything about the days. Okay, let me just say one thing. Work with Chief Sullivan. Let him do what he's doing. Don't be a commissioner. Don't be like Mayor de Blasio. And don't
Richard Senna, 36-year resident of town of Clarkstown. Good evening, town board. I'm going to change this up a little because I think we're losing some focus here. Tuesday, February 4, 2014, I sent an email to then town attorney, Ms. Mealy, And in the email, a simple sentence requesting the standards and the requirements of the hiring of Keith Cornell. I did not hear a response back. On the 18th, I sent a second email telling her that I didn't hear from her. Then on the 3rd, I sent a third email and I got a response. And the response from Ms. Mealy, the ex-town attorney, and I know this is 2 years ago, but I think it has to do with what we're dealing with in this room. Hi, Mr. Senator, can we speak tomorrow? What is a good time and number to reach you? Amy. I responded the next day, Ms. Mealy, my legal counsel, has advised me that if you want to speak with me, they need to be in attendance. I never heard back from her. So my question is the same question that I asked 2 years ago. What is the procedure when we hire town attorneys? And Mrs. Hausner, Councilwoman Hausner, you have your finger on the button. I am in this room asking you to report next meeting, what is the procedure with Keith Cornell? How was Keith Cornell hired? What documents were used? What qualifications did he have to become a deputy town attorney? Thank you.
So there was somebody over here, these two, and then bring him in.
Good evening. My name is Peggy Greeley. I've been living in Clarkstown for the last 25 years, been in Rockland County my entire life. First of all, it's one of my first meetings I sat here. You campaigned that you were going to save us money. I sat here tonight and listened to these resolutions, and all I heard was dollar signs. And now you're going to bring a lawsuit against the chief of police. He's done nothing wrong in my eyes and all the people in this room. So, Mr. Holman, you keep referring to the case against Chief Sullivan as a minor disciplinary matter. I know many police officers that have been disciplined, and none of them have been suspended. If this is a minor disciplinary matter, why is it necessary to suspend the chief, hire the ex-attorney general to hear the case, and make a media circus out of this? My suggestions at this point is, I agree with the woman who spoke earlier. Many of us have children. We teach them how to get along. Bullying is the biggest thing going in the schools these days. This seems like a bullying act. This seems like people that aren't getting along, that the council sit down and get along. But what kind of role models are you showing right now to our children, to the Clarkstown people? My suggestion, get this over with, hire Chief Sullivan back, please.
My name is Sharon Hitman, the Hitman with 2 T's. I've worked with the Clarkstown Police, I hate to tell you how many decades. I've gone through several police chiefs. I've taken some of the old community police, and now they're captains or retired. And we've gone and we've taken our show on the road, so to speak. As Tony can tell you. And we've saved lives. Maybe not right away, but with the actual blessing of the chiefs, we've saved lives. And I was strictly and am strictly a volunteer. So if you want to save money, get those people on the committees that you just appointed, save their salaries and let them volunteer. But don't cut our police. That's not to be cut. They leave their houses and their families, and they come in this very dangerous time of our country, and they put their lives on the line with sometimes inadequate protection because sometimes the equipment is not up to date. And they leave their precious children and wives, and they serve and protect us, the residents of Rockland County, the residents of Clarkstown in this case. And for that, I thank the police, Chief Sullivan now, and the former chiefs. And I've worked with many chiefs in Rockland County in my various capacities under MAD, housing format, Ramapo rescuing our youth, and going with our roadshow on alcohol poisoning, underage drinking. We had some of our Clarkstown police acting in host liability, a video so we can go and show parents what their responsibilities are. Don't cut our police.
30 seconds.
Don't cut the chief. You can 30 second me all you want, but I've been talking with our police in front of hundreds of parents. They don't have a clue on what they should be doing to supervise. We started safe homes programs in the school district for free. We didn't have to have money to start these programs. They were free because we donated, my family donated the paper, the copying, and everything else. You want to save money on the town hall, then save whatever you want. Don't cut the police. They save our lives and our property, and let's keep going back to organized police. I've worked with all the chiefs. You have a great firemen's training center. They take the kids, and they used to do the SWAT team there. I'm old. I'm a brain tumor survivor, but I'm feisty. Maybe because I'm a brain tumor survivor, I don't want to, I'll cut through this nonsense. And the people that are here, go tell your friends, go vote. I'm tired of seeing people go into office and then they don't make their promises stand. Find out these supposedly litigators that are supposed to be neutral, are they all Republicans? Find out. I vote for the person, not the party. But if they're all Republicans, those aren't neutral people. I understand, but as I said, I'm feisty and I'll be there. And this is not my first town board meeting, not for anything.
She was the next, and then it was you.
Clarkstown City, when this board was voted in, I didn't vote for it. But it was supposed to be a transparent government. Well, it's anything but. And I'd like to remind the board members, they keep telling us rules apply to everyone, including the chief. The rules also apply to you. You had people come here to a town board meeting about term limits, where I was told by George Hellman that only me and George Remote were the two people carrying on about term limits. When 20 people got up and spoke, you paid no attention because you had your minds made up before you came into the room. You're doing the same thing tonight. I listened to the radio yesterday also, and I heard George talk about Zuckerby. I thought Zuckerby was the head guy as far as law enforcement in this county. And George said he was going to sit down with him and tell him that he should recuse himself. I don't think so. I think he should be right in the middle of it. And also, the night that the chief was suspended, not only did the blogger put it out within the hour, supposedly the $110,000 or $200,000 donor was sitting in the back of the room, and somebody asked him, what was he doing here? And he said, oh, the chief is being suspended tonight. How did he know that? We also have people on boards that I objected to recently. Back in 1994, he gave information to drug dealers that their phones were being tapped. Now he's sitting on the alarm users board, dealing directly with the police department. What a slap in the face to the police department. You know, in the movie Backdraft, Stephen Baldwin says to the councilman that's going out in handcuffs, you see that little light flashing in the corner of your eye? That's your career dissipation. And all I can say to you is, if this doesn't work out, there's going to be an opening next year for town supervisor.
There's two people I didn't want to follow, Marge Hook and Kevin Kilduff, and I'm following both. Good evening, my name is Dan Weisberg. I am the Administrative Lieutenant at the Clarkstown Police Department. I've been there for 29 years and about 40 years in law enforcement. I wasn't planning on speaking tonight, but since Sergeant Gorski, who works for me, stuck his neck out a little bit, in case he's on a foot post next week, I'll be walking it right now. I wear a lot of different hats in this town. Not only am I a police lieutenant, I'm an attorney. Not only am I an attorney, but I'm very involved in civic associations. I've served on the board of directors of one with Frank. 3 of you sitting up there have been through the program that I'm currently the chair of. I am a Clarkstown Republican Committee member. I've been on the executive board of the Republican Committee. I not only voted for you people, but I also helped and was out there actively campaigning for you, spending countless hours. And I have to tell you, I'm not here to bash you. There's enough people that will do that for me. I don't need to do that. But what I am here to tell you is I'm very disappointed in the way you're acting. This whole matter could have been handled entirely differently. I would have had much more respect if you had walked in the second day you were in office, went to Mike Sullivan and said, Mike, you're not our guy. We want you to get out. He might not have left, but I'd have a lot more respect for you. The way you've gone about it is anything but transparent. It's tearing the police department apart at a time not only with what's going on nationally, but we're in the middle of a budget process where you're telling us every department has to cut 5% of the budget. I'm the person who works my behind off trying to make that happen, and the one person, no offense to Captain Finnegoff, Captain Mann, but the one person who is integral to that budget process is sitting right there, and we don't have him in the room to help us. Look, I can't possibly do justice to what I want to say in 3 minutes, okay? And I know you don't have to respond at all sitting up there. That's the beauty of sitting on the town board. But what you can do is you can demonstrate leadership. Leadership doesn't come from blogging left and right about people and causing dissension. Leadership doesn't come from making comments on those blogs or in the public forum. Leadership comes from making the right decisions that people can have trust in and can stand by. So what you can do, you charge Chief Sullivan, that's your right. You want that process to play out, that's your right. But you can also put that man back into office at this critical juncture, let him run the police department, which he's eminently qualified to do, and keep the politics out of the police department. It's a simple request. Thank you.
First here in the Rockland County PBA president. The town of Clarkstown does not have an acting police commission. You are currently acting as a town board with police commission authority, according to the Rockland County Police Act of 1936. Marge Hook was right when she made note that there was not a public vote for the suspension of Chief Sullivan. Why were the town board procedures ignored? Can you answer why you have asked for a chief's test 7 days into your position as supervisor? Was there anticipation of someday suspending Chief Sullivan? It seems quite questionable to me. It seems quite questionable to everybody in this room. 7 days into office, you asked for a city chief who is doing a stellar job for the community to fill his own position. I have dealt with disciplines in the capacity of the PBA for approximately 13 years. These two charges, I have read the charges, many people here have read the charges. There are two charges, two trumped up, bogus charges stretched out into 7. These charges that I have dealt with over the years, my capacity as PBA representative, would not amount to no more than a letter of discipline in a person's file. But yet you still feel you feel that these charges are strong enough to fire Chief Sullivan, suspend him, and eventually fire him, because let's be honest with you, Mr. Harrington and Mr. Bacco are going to fire Mr. Chief Sullivan, okay? They're going to recommend that, you're going to accept that recommendation, and he will be terminated. What is the motive here? Do you have any animus prior to filling your position as supervisor against Chief Sullivan? Why did you take CPD administrative rights away from our IT department 14 days into your position as supervisor? Was this in anticipation of monitoring our emails? Your actions are endangering our community, the men and women of Clarkstown. Please reconsider your actions and get it straight.
The day that my daughter started 2nd grade, after I got back to dropping her at school, I had a phone call. I had to go to my father-in-law's house, but he had died, and I had to go. And I got there, I didn't really know what was happening. It was a very difficult morning. And the cop that they sent was Sullivan. And I cannot tell you how professional he was, how kind he was. He was everything you would want someone to be when you were standing there in the most difficult situation ever. And as I'm listening here, I can see you are not really doing the best thing you can for this town. This is really very personally motivated, I believe, and I think it's a sin, and I think you should really reconsider, because I think he is an outstanding human being. And when I needed a cop, I was glad he was the one who was there.
Anyone else wishing to speak?
I'm sorry, I don't mean to keep coming up here, but I just needed to clarify from the town attorney that was hired by George Homan this year. You don't feel it is important that Bacco or Harrington have any ties to Rob Astorino? I think that's very questionable. That's all.
So I'm a Rockland resident, and I just have to tell you, listening to this.
Just identify yourself.
Sorry, Amy Green.
Which one?
Amy Green. And it's very disappointing because your actions and that of whomever made this decision was very short-sighted. You've now made yourself susceptible to having to reopen a lot of cases because you have people who are not supposed to be reading emails. You have rape victims. You have domestic violence. You have a lot of these, and you have now made not just Clarkstown, but the entire county susceptible to lawsuits. And not only have you now taken the chief out of his position, but even if he is, which he should be returned back, those cases will not disappear. So even when he is back here, where he rightfully should be, the town as well as the county will be paying for your errors.
Okay, so we'll try and answer some of what we can answer, and ask our attorneys to address what they can. I never respond to. I think it's really unfortunate that there was some personal attacks that were leveled and questioning and motives. And I just want to be clear to our former chief. Okay, we'll answer what we can, and for those that chose to remain, I guess first and foremost, I think it's always a disappointing thing when personal attacks are leveled. Chief Goldust, you know that I was ordained as a Roman Catholic priest. You know that I spent 21 years working with people with disabilities. And you may not know, I took a $30,000 pay cut to run and become supervisor because I felt that our town was going in the wrong direction, that our town was littered with corruption. And by the fact that we've had multiple subpoenas from the United States Attorney, I think that they would agree with my assessment. So I take great offense to you characterizing anything about me or my family. You don't know me, and I've just contributed to the heat of the moment. But it was absolutely disrespectful and beneath you as a former chief. I have great respect for you, and I've seen you in action within the community, but that was absolutely uncalled for, and frankly unconscionable.
Have you read your brother's?
Chief, it has nothing to do with anybody within my family. There's not a dialogue here. You have your time. It's nothing to do with anybody in my family. I'm a person that maintains my own character. I'm a person that expects and trusts that people will judge a person on the content of their character and not cast aspersions based on affiliations or associations, which is what's taken place throughout this entire process. And it's really, frankly, been dignity of a good number of folks. So beyond that, I also want to we made changes, and I know my attorneys are looking at me because they've indicated that we have a civil rights lawsuit, and we have a police disciplinary proceeding going forward. But let me be clear, and I'll reiterate. The district attorney in his comments to LOHA did not address my comments. And he put information out there that was clever in the way in which it was done. Let me be clear what we did when I took office. On January 3rd, I came into office I was sworn in that night. At 7:30 that morning. At 10 o'clock, I received a phone call from federal authorities asking to meet with me as the new supervisor. We met with them later in the week, and within days, we took steps to secure our internet, to secure all of the town documents that had been requested, and we made our network more secure. And I'll stand by that statement. I know that my attorneys are kind of giving the evil eye that we're not supposed to be speaking beyond that, but that's demonstrably provable, and we've dealt with outside counsel and moved forward with that. Beyond that, I'm going to ask our attorneys to try and address whatever, but Ms. Hook, I know she didn't stay for this. Yeah, we have been broadcasting meetings. Actually, in fact, we started broadcasting our town board meetings last month. This will be broadcast as well. I think that's a question that she had raised, or a comment that she had raised. Beyond that, I think I'll ask our attorneys to address it if they can on everything else.
Really just one additional point. It's a matter of protocol, which the reaction tonight is so strong that perhaps no one cares about the process and what the protocols are here. But first and foremost, the chief is entitled to a hearing on the charges. It will be a fair hearing. We'll have competent counsel defending him. There'll be competent person prosecuting the case. And at the end of the day, the town board will decide, at least some members of the town board will decide whether or not the chief engaged in any misconduct or incompetence and what the penalty should be.
Can you explain what you mean by some members of the town board will decide?
I can explain that. The way it likely would work, because this is complicated in that the rules of the department anticipate that the people subject to discipline would be anyone other than the chief of police. He's normally the person that commences disciplinary proceedings. He's very effective at it. He has a number of cases, and he's shown quite a bit of skill in that. The rules are slightly less clear when it comes to disciplining the commanding officer of the department, but someone has to do it. Otherwise, you would have a person in the highest position in the police department, other than the commissioners, that wouldn't be subject to any discipline. As a result of that, one member of the town board, one member, that being the town supervisor, had to actually be the charging party in the disciplinary proceeding. So the town supervisor took that on. That's an administrative responsibility. It's not a legislative function. The legislative function that would have been required, that would have required a vote, once again, would have been a suspension without pay. That did not happen in this case. Instead, there was a discussion, and we'll avoid any protracted discussion of anything that happened in the executive session, but I think it's appropriate to set the record straight. There was a discussion with members of the town board present, one participating by conference call, that member was out of town, but a discussion by conference call about what was contemplated. The town supervisor did not need the authority of the town board specifically to bring a disciplinary charge. Quite frankly, any of you in your capacity as a town board member could have done that. The supervisor felt it was important to be sure that there was a consensus of the town board before taking that action, because it is such a important action, as we can see tonight. So what occurred was a consensus of the board. My recollection of that was that there certainly was at least a consensus, if not unanimity, on that. No vote was taken, no vote was required. At a subsequent date, there may be votes of the town board on other aspects of the case. Certainly the final determination of the disciplinary case is something that's done by action of the town board.
Okay, I have two more questions. One, was that an executive session that would have had to be noticed?
It was actually not even an executive session.
Well, you just referred to that as an executive session. So I never knew that there was an executive session.
Yeah.
So my question is, was there an executive session that other people knew about that I didn't?
By reference to executive session, Councilwoman, there was a meeting with the advice of counsel to be given. I was present, and the town attorney was present as well. It was not a formal board meeting from my recollection of that evening, and it was not an executive session, nor did there need to be. You have the right, as you know, if you wish to have the advice of counsel, to take that even as a group. It's an exception under the open meetings law, so it was more properly stated, and I appreciate the correction. It was a meeting for the advice of counsel in the context of the town board.
Well, with all due respect, I find that the way that terms are thrown around, you, in the case of an executive session, Vincent Balacio, in the case of a vote taking place that has been explained that it wasn't taken in place, are being a little cavalier with the actualities of what happened. I think that when we take on something that has such large consequences, then we should be dotting our I's and crossing our T's. And so I don't know that there's room for any error. And that's just my personal opinion on that.
And I appreciate that. I don't believe that's an error, but I certainly appreciate your view on that.
Do you have anything else you'd like to add?
No, I don't. I serve as special legal counsel to the town. I'm not prosecuting the case. So my role in this would be, as I do for many other communities, is to ensure that there is integrity in the process. That's the type of thing that I'm very comfortable telling the town board. If something isn't being handled appropriately, I feel that is my role. That's again something I do for many communities. I teach police discipline before municipal organizations to make sure public officials have a very good sense of what is right and what is wrong. And I believe in this case, however hard this has been, and I believe it's actually something that I see in all of these, a painful thing. No one wants to be here disciplining their chief of police. Everyone feels very strongly about this police department. Everyone here loves this town and wants the best for the town. But I think you took an action that you felt was appropriate, and we're going to make sure that at the end of the day, everyone that's a participant in the process walks away and at least feels that they got a fair shake. That's what you owe the chief and every other member of the department. I'm sure that will happen.
And just, to clarify, this is similar to other processes that have taken place for a number of years.
It is, and I wish I could comment more extensively on that, but I've been here a relatively short period of time, so I can only tell you, and what I know is primarily working with Chief Sullivan over the last 7 months, that as cases develop, and they're all a little bit different, but we analyze the case on whether or not there should be a suspension with pay, without pay. We sometimes look at modified duty positions, and there's an analysis that goes in there with the participation of counsel and often the police captains. So there isn't anything unusual about this case other than the fact that it's the commanding officer of the department that is somewhat unusual, but that has happened in other police departments as well. And I think that the important point is that the process that's followed for other police officers would be applicable to the chief of police as well.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Okay, at this point, I'd like to entertain a motion to adjourn to a brief executive session. We won't be taking any action. We'll adjourn afterwards. Moved by Councilman Borelli, second by Councilman Noto. All those in favor say aye.
I have a question. Are executive sessions supposed to be noticed?
I'll defer to the town attorney.
No, it's a public meeting, so we can go right into it.
What is the executive session about?
A brief personnel matter. Take a minute.